So you found a version of the carnivore diet that works well for you. Congratulations. You've been driving hard in the paint. You've been flying through the galaxy at warp speed, putting together the pieces. You've finally found your groove. Maybe you're just eating super healthy animal-based foods to satiety. You're starting to see the body fat levels drop off, the body composition changing. You see the lean muscle that you've been working so hard in the gym to attain. And now maybe you kind of got some wild hair up your ass that you want to take it to another level. And that's okay. Maybe you just really want to be shredded. You really want to be peeled. Guys, you may want to take this to that sub 10% body fat level. You may want to look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Women, you may want to get to that sub 20% level. Look like your favorite glistening fitness bunny that you see on Instagram. Doesn't matter. It's all good in the hood. You can do this. The only criteria is you're going to have to take the level of dedication a little bit further. You might have to suffer a little bit. And you have to be a human being with an active pulse, which is everyone. Well, nearly everyone. There's a few out there. Anyway. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to understand that as you get to that deep level of low body fat, the body doesn't really want to be to those super unnatural levels of body composition. So you have to convince your body once it starts to stall that it has to make some changes to be able to continue down the path, push through, and start to tap into that low level of body fat that you have remaining to get you to that super lean level. Everyone has a physiological metabolic set point to a degree. Nearly everyone does. And you're going to find out what that is for you. So if you're doing everything right, you're crossing all your T's, you're dotting all your I's, and now you're starting to wonder, why is everything all of a sudden shut down? Well, it might be because your body has reached or is getting close to that metabolic set point. And there is some scientific evidence to support this. But in order for him to get to that sub 10 extremely lean look that some just want, I still have to reduce that fat energy component to get them to start to free up that small amount of remaining body fat that they have, much like I did when I was competing. Is there something from a physiological level that you almost reach a certain set point on a higher amount of fat, and then inevitably, most people, you're going to have to remove some of it?
There is, absolutely. It's a thing called hysteresis. If you want to use an electrical analogy, it's hysteresis. It's actually a homeostatic mechanism. It's encoded in your genes, whereby your genetic ideal is not much leaner than 15% as a male. As a female, it's 20-25%. So if you want to force your body under 15% as a male or 25% as a female, you have to work against your genes to get your body to achieve that, because it is not natural.
So when that inevitability happens and things do start to slow down, you're going to have to make some changes in the ratios of your macros that you're taking in your carnivore diet to get your body to keep moving forward to get to that super low level of leanness. At some point, the body's going to think that perhaps it's starving. Perhaps it needs to hold on to a little bit of body fat for survival. Maybe it just thinks you're a shitty hunter. Whatever the case may be, we have to incorporate a little bit of voodoo to keep things humming down the tracks. So what do? Well, you have to lower the energy component. Whether you operate on a carbohydrate metabolism or you operate on a fat metabolism, both are energy components. So if you want to get to that super lean level of body composition, at some point, you're going to have to make an adjustment in the energy component of the food that you consume and reduce it. What happens when you reduce the energy component is you adjust that energy to protein ratio, and then your body recognizes that reduction in energy, so it will tap in and start to free up that little bit of body fat you have remaining to make up the difference. Now, this is something you don't want to do long term. If you do it too long, if you stay in an energy deficit, or you can call it caloric deficit if you want, if you do this too long, it's going to start to yield diminishing returns, and everything is going to shut down, and the whole thing's going to shit the bed. So that's not someplace you want to go. So number one, you want to make sure that if you're in some sort of a cut, more of an extreme cut or hard cut, as I like to call it, you generally don't want to do that more than like 8 to 12 weeks. And that's even a long time. And once you achieve your goal, after that 8 to 12 weeks of hard cut, you want to pull out of that, go into a diet break, and raise that energy component back up to re-nourish the body and have some hormonal balance restored. I'll take myself for example. When I was competing and I wanted to get super, super lean, I would lower that energy component, usually sometime inside of 12 weeks, and it would be a drastic change. Just earlier this year, April of 2024, I decided to embark on a challenge where I was going to put a whole bunch of weight on my back and ruck up a mountain in the July heat for 32 miles. It was a 50K ultra ruck challenge. So while I was in that level of dedication, in that mindset to do whatever it took to achieve that goal, it was a perfect time for me to also make some changes in my diet and use that dedication and that mindset I was in to really push hard to achieve a low level of body fat. My reasoning was a leaner, lighter body is going to move through space better, provided that I held on to as much lean mass as I possibly could. Over the course of 12 weeks, I lost 26 pounds. Now I'm going to do a complete video on exactly what I did to lose that 26 pounds, but for now, let's stick to the topic of getting super peeled and the things you have to do to get there. So once that inevitable stall occurs, then you're going to have to reduce that energy component and get your body to free up the remaining stored body fat. So if you're taking in roughly, say, 60-65% of your intake from fat and maybe 30% roughly from protein, then as you start to stall, you're going to have to turn the dial down on that energy component and perhaps raise the protein a bit. So as I started to get to the point where I was getting closer and closer to stage or closer and closer to a goal date or some sort of an athletic event where I wanted to be at my best, I would titrate the fat down, keep the protein high, and as I got closer, I might even titrate that fat component down to an extreme level. There were times, perhaps in the last 4 weeks of my prep, where I would reduce the energy component to around 30% of my total intake. Yeah, it sucked. It was suffering. It was hard. But you sometimes have to go to these extreme places in order to achieve an extreme physique. And remember, it's something that you do not want to do super long term. So now may be a really good time to throw some numbers at you and give you an example of what some cutting macros might be for somebody who's really trying to get to that super lean level. When I was preparing for my recent ruck competition, I gave myself 12 weeks. I used my goal weight as an example to calculate the numbers. It works fairly well for most people, but obviously it's just a baseline and you might have to make some adjustments along the way because everybody's different and everybody reacts differently. It's going to be different across the board. But for me, this worked obviously rather well. So for me, I used a goal body weight of 190 pounds. So I calculated my fat at 0.7 grams of fat per pound of goal body weight, which got me at 133 grams of fat. That's where I began there. For protein, it was 228 grams. That's 1.2 grams of protein per pound of goal body weight. Gave me a total of 912 calories roughly. And then I always allow or allocate roughly 50 grams of carbs, which may be more some days, maybe considerably less other days. And I usually do that just around hard training efforts. So that's an allocation of 200 calories. That gave me a grand total of 2,309 calories. Now, as I progressed through the cut, I made an adjustment, as we've been talking about, in that energy component. And I brought the fat down to 0.5 grams of fat per pound of goal body weight, which brought my fat grams down to 95 grams of fat, kept the protein at 228 grams, and still allocated that 50 grams plus or minus of carbs around heavy training efforts, which brought the total caloric intake down to, around 1,900 and some odd calories. So that worked very, very well for me. And then I would eventually throw in a couple of protein-sparing modified fast days, or what I just call a protein fast, 1 or 2 days a week, non-consecutive days. I've got a whole video on that, so check it out. And this worked extremely well for me. So I just wanted to give you a quick baseline of what those numbers might look like. And again, you're going to have to make adjustments according to whatever your output, your genetics, your age, whatever the case may be. Let's get back to the video and take you guys across the finish line. Now, one of the main things that you want to try to accomplish when you're in a hard cut is preserving as much lean mass as humanly possible. You want to keep all the muscle that you've built, right? So how do you do that? How do you convince the body to hang on to this muscle while we're freeing up this last little bit of body fat to get to this unnatural state of body composition? Well, two things are vitally important, and I've mentioned them before in the past. You have to maintain a very high level of protein intake, animal protein preferably, obviously, and you need to keep lifting weights very intensely. You have to send a message to your body that you will continue to regularly engage in high intensity strength training, and you are consuming high levels of protein, which tells the body, whatever this guy keeps doing, we better maintain as much lean mass on our frame as possible in the event that he ever does this again, even under these extreme circumstances, which you will. The worst thing you can do in this time of hard cutting is not train hard. So make sure that you're training hard in the gym to convince the body to keep as much lean mass as possible. I know this is absolute blasphemy in the carnivore world for most people, but you may want to track your macros for that period of time. You want to make sure that what energy you're taking in has got you in a slight, if not deep, energy deficit to what your body is typically accustomed to. So you have to figure out roughly what your maintenance is, and your maintenance energy intake is the amount of food you take in and achieve roughly the same body weight as you're cruising down the tracks. So when you start to go into that deficit, you're going to reduce the total volume of food, the total mass of food, and then as you lower it, you're going to keep bringing the fat down and keeping the protein high, if not even raising it a little bit to make up the difference. Once you start to lower that fat component, once again, your body will start to free up that last remaining bit of body fat in order to push you toward that goal of super leanness. So wrapping this up, if you are trying to get super lean, if you're cutting, if you're trying to get ripped and peeled, whatever the case may be, and you find that you've hit a stall, no matter what you do, it just doesn't seem to be working anymore and you can't get rid of any more body fat, you may need to dial down that main energy component that you utilize to convince the body to start freeing up what stored body fat it has remaining and get things pumping down the tracks again. So again, I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for your support. I'm so glad to have you all here, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. I'm out.